Defendant Hermann Goering, on the counts of the indictment on which you have been convicted, the International Military Tribunal sentences you to death by hanging.
It all ended in a single night, but the real story was just getting started. On October 15, 1946, Hermann Goering took his own life inside a prison cell in Nuremberg only hours before his execution. Just like that, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany was gone, but what happened next to the family he left behind is where things take a shocking turn. Once surrounded by extreme wealth and influence, the Goering family suddenly faced a harsh new reality. Their grand estate, Hall, had already been reduced to rubble on Goering's own orders as the war collapsed around them. In April 1945, Emmy and her young daughter Eda were forced to flee, moving deeper into Bavaria while everything they knew disappeared piece by piece. What used to be a life of comfort quickly turned into a desperate retreat through a crumbling system. By May 6, 1945, U.S. forces located Hermann Goering near Rastatt, Austria, and he surrendered without delay. Within hours, the news spread, and soon after, Emmy and Eda were found in the same region. They weren't treated like ordinary civilians. They were placed under watch as part of a special group connected to high-ranking officials. They were moved into guarded buildings, sometimes former hotels, sometimes private homes taken over by the military. One thing was clear, they were not free to leave anytime soon. Emmy, once seen at major public events and often photographed with top leaders, now faced constant questioning. Investigators wanted answers about her role, her lifestyle, and how close she had been to key decisions during the war. For the first time in years, there were no assistance, no protection, and no influence left to rely on. Everything had changed, and it changed fast. For Eda, the shift was even intense. At just 7 years old, she went from living in a grand household full of staff and ceremony to staying in unfamiliar, guarded locations. Reports described her as quiet and well-behaved, often holding tightly to a small suitcase with the few belongings she was allowed to keep. She kept asking the same question again and again: when would she see her father? At the same time, officials began carefully reviewing everything connected to the Goering family. Jewelry, artwork, clothing, and personal items were all examined. Anything of value could be taken for further investigation. Even items Emmy tried to hold on to were often removed for inspection. Over the next few months, Emmy and Eda were moved several times, staying in different locations near southern Germany, including areas close to Munich. Even though the war had officially ended, their situation was far from over. With Hermann Goering now facing trial at Nuremberg, Emmy and Eda were caught between major legal changes happening across Germany and the complete collapse of their former life. When the Nuremberg trials began in November 1945, Hermann Goering quickly became the most talked-about figure in the courtroom. His statements were followed worldwide as he defended his actions and tried to present himself as a political leader rather than someone responsible for the war's destruction. Meanwhile, Emmy and Eda remained under supervision, waiting and watching from a distance. Emmy repeatedly asked for updates but was not allowed direct contact with him. On October 1, 1946, the final judgment was delivered. Goering was found guilty and sentenced to death. Then, just 2 weeks later, everything took another sudden turn. On October 15th, he ended his life in his cell using a hidden capsule. The news spread quickly, and when it reached Emmy and Eda, the reaction was described as quiet but deeply emotional. Emmy reportedly struggled to accept what had happened at first, while Eda, only 8 years old, simply asked where her father had gone. At that point, the consequences became even more serious for the family. Authorities moved forward with fully dismantling the Goering estate. Properties, financial accounts, valuables, everything was reviewed and processed. While Hall was already gone, many items remained, especially a large collection of artwork that had drawn major attention. Investigators tracked hundreds of pieces across Germany and Austria, linking them to broader recovery efforts. The collection was eventually broken apart, with items either returned, stored, or used as evidence. By 1947, as Germany entered a new phase of rebuilding and accountability, Emmy Goering's situation became a major focus. Unlike many others connected to the regime, she had been a highly visible public figure for years. She had attended major events, appeared in official settings, and was closely associated with the leadership circle. Now, that past placed her under even greater scrutiny as everything continued to unfold. Some Allied investigators even gave Emmy a striking label, calling her the social first lady of the Reich, a phrase that would follow her into every legal proceeding that came next. After 1945, the losses hit from every direction. It wasn't just about status, it was financial too. With her estate gone and no access to the life she once had, Emmy entered the post-war years with very little security. Attempts to claim compensation in the late 1940s didn't go far, blocked by strict denazification rules. Even pension rights connected to her husband's former positions were denied, leaving her to rebuild from almost nothing. Eda's future was just as uncertain. While children were not judged under denazification laws, the weight of the Goering name followed her everywhere. At one point, officials even considered placing her under outside guardianship during the process. That idea was eventually rejected, and the decision was made to return her to Emmy, though still under supervision once her mother's case was settled. In early 1947, Emmy appeared before a Munich tribunal. The case drew serious attention. Prosecutors presented photographs, documents, and witness accounts showing her role in public life during that era. They argued her visibility helped support the image of the leadership at the time. Emmy pushed back, stating she had only been a private individual placed into a role she never actively pursued. The decision came in March 1948, and it was heavy. Emmy was classified as a belastet, meaning a major offender under the system, one of the most serious categories. The ruling stripped her of remaining property rights and blocked any claims to belongings still held by authorities. She was banned from working in public sectors and faced limits on media involvement and participation in cultural life. On top of that, she was denied any pension linked to her husband's former roles. She didn't accept it quietly. Appeals were filed almost immediately. Emmy argued the classification exaggerated her involvement, pointing out she held no official power. Her defense highlighted her role as a mother and her distance from major decision-making. Over time, some restrictions were softened, especially those related to movement and personal work, but the core penalties stayed in place for the rest of her life. After the trial, Emmy settled in Munich. Her lifestyle changed completely. Instead of grand estates, she lived in modest conditions, supported in part by old connections from her earlier career in the theater world. Some later stories painted her as completely broke, while others suggest she managed a quiet and stable life, just without the luxury she once knew. Historians still debate how accurate her own descriptions of hardship really were. Years later, she briefly stepped back into the spotlight. In 1967, she released her autobiography, An der Seite meines Mannes, followed by an English version titled My Life with Goering in 1972. In the book, she described her husband in a positive light, presenting him as attentive and devoted. She stood by that version of events and never publicly changed her stance. Her final years were marked by declining health. On June 8, 1973, Emmy died in Munich at the age of 80. Eda stayed by her side until the very end, closing a chapter that had stretched from extreme privilege to a far more quiet life. Eda Goering's story began in a completely different world. Born on June 2, 1938, her arrival was treated as a major national event at the time. Just days later, large crowds gathered in Berlin as Hermann Goering returned home with Emmy and their newborn daughter. On November 4, 1938, Adolf Hitler acted as her godfather during a formal ceremony at Hall, an event that even received international media coverage. From the start, Eda was surrounded by signs of status. She received valuable gifts, including artwork attributed to Lucas Cranach the Elder. The family estate itself was massive, located in the shore-side forest and filled with features like an indoor pool, a private cinema, a gym, and even a small zoo. Among the inner circle, she was often referred to as the Little Princess, a title that reflected the world she was born into. In 1940, that image was taken even further. A small palace, about 50 meters long, was built just for her in the estate's orchard. It included its own small theater and became known as the Eda Schlösschen, a symbol of just how extraordinary her early life had been before everything changed. That entire world collapsed in 1945, and for Eda Goering, childhood ended almost overnight. Instead of growing up surrounded by comfort, she found herself living under Allied supervision in guarded housing. After her mother's legal case was finished, she returned with Emmy to Munich, where life looked completely different. Through the late 1940s and 1950s, she tried to adjust, going to local schools and living in small, modest spaces. But one thing never changed. The name Goering stayed with her, bringing constant attention she never asked for and never tried to escape. As she got older, Eda focused on building a stable future. She studied law at the University of Munich and worked briefly as a legal clerk. Later, she shifted paths and spent many years working in a hospital laboratory as a medical technical assistant. Her life remained private and structured. She never married and did not have children, choosing to stay out of the spotlight for most of her adult years. However, in the 1970s, she briefly stepped back into public view. During that time, she was closely linked to journalist Gerhard Heidemann, who had purchased the Karin II, a yacht that once belonged to her father. Through that connection, she found herself in social settings where discussions about the past were common and sometimes intense. Gatherings on the yacht even included individuals connected to that earlier era, bringing history into very real and personal conversations. What made Eda stand out was her firm and consistent stance on her father. While many others with similar family ties chose distance, she never changed her view. In interviews during the 1990s and early 2000s, she described him as caring and protective in her personal life. When asked directly about his historical role, she kept her response simple, saying she remembered a loving father. That position remained unchanged throughout her life. She continued living quietly, spending time in Schwaz, Austria, before eventually returning to Munich. When she passed away on December 21, 2018, coverage of her life highlighted one defining trait: her unwavering loyalty. It was something that set her apart not only from wider society, but even from others connected to her family history. But Eda was not the only descendant navigating that legacy. Her great-niece, Bettina Goering, took a completely different path. Born after the war and raised outside the immediate household, Bettina grew up fully aware of the weight tied to the family name. Instead of holding on to it, she chose to confront it directly. As an adult, Bettina moved to the United States and later settled in New Mexico. In interviews, she openly spoke about the emotional impact of being connected to such a well-known historical figure. Her perspective gained widespread attention in the 2000s when she revealed that both she and her brother had made a personal decision not to have children. She explained it as a way to ensure that future generations would not carry what she described as a heavy historical burden. Her choice showed a clear break from the past. While Eda held firmly to her personal memories and loyalty, Bettina focused on acknowledging history and creating distance from it. Two lives shaped by the same name, but taken in completely different directions. And that's where this story comes to a close. If you found this deep dive interesting, check out the next video.